The waltz ended, and Althea Dalton found herself alone in the center of Silver Creek's town hall, with every eye burning into her back. Sheriff Jesse Thornton stood near the punch bowl, hat gripped in both hands, jaw working like he was chewing words he refused to spit. The musicians had stopped mid-measure when Mayor Crenshaw announced that the telegraph operator had information about the Mackey fugitive and failed to report it promptly. The accusation hung in the air, thick as gun smoke. Althea felt her cheeks burn, but kept her spine iron straight. She had delayed exactly 4 hours before filing the wire about the wanted man's sighting, and those 4 hours might have let him slip the news. The mayor's voice still echoed off the rafters. Dereliction of civic duty during a town dance was humiliation designed for maximum damage. Jesse moved first, crossing the floor in 5 deliberate strides that made his spurs chime. He stopped close enough that she could smell trail dust and leather. "Althea," he said quietly, and the way he shaped her name made something twist beneath her ribs. "You got reason for holding that wire?" His voice carried just far enough for the nearest gossips to hear. She met his eyes and saw not accusation, but something stranger. Calculation, maybe. Or opportunity. "Yes," she said, matching his volume. "I needed to verify the report before causing a panic over mistaken identity. It was a thin excuse, and they both knew it." Jesse's mouth twitched at one corner. "Then you and I need to discuss proper procedure," he said. "Tomorrow morning. My office." He turned to face the room and raised his voice. Miss Dalton acted with appropriate caution. "This matter is under official investigation, and I'll thank folks to let me do my job without interference." The crowd murmured, but the mayor's face went tight. Jesse offered Althea his arm like nothing had happened. Like leading her back to the edge of the dance floor was the most natural conclusion in the world. She hesitated one heartbeat, then took it. His forearm was solid under her glove. They walked past 30 pairs of watching eyes, and she felt his steady pace anchor her shaking knees. When they reached the far wall, he released her and settled his hat low. "You just made an enemy of the mayor," she whispered. Jesse's tired eyes held hers. "I made a choice," he said. "Tomorrow, 8 sharp. Don't be late." Then he walked out into the November night and left her standing there with her pulse hammering and no idea what had just shifted between them. Althea arrived at 7:45 because waiting made her crazy, and sitting at the telegraph desk pretending to work was worse. Jesse was already there, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading a file that looked older than the town itself. He glanced up when she entered and gestured to the chair opposite his desk. She sat without removing her shawl. The office smelled like old coffee and gun oil. Jesse closed the file and leaned back. "The Mackey fugitive," he began, "is wanted for armed robbery in Cheyenne and possibly murder in Laramie. He was spotted at the Juniper Ranch 2 days ago, trying to buy a horse under a false name. You received the description wire from the marshal's office and sat on it for 4 hours before forwarding it to me." Althea's throat tightened. "I needed to be certain." Jesse shook his head slowly. "You needed to protect someone." She flinched. His eyes never left hers. "I've been sheriff here 3 years," he continued. "I know when people are scared and when they're covering. You're both. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me why you hesitated, and I'm going to decide if it compromises the manhunt. And if it does, we'll figure out how to fix it, without destroying your reputation further. She wanted to stand, to leave, to tell him it was none of his business. But the way he said "we'll figure it out" made her hands unclench slightly. "The Juniper Ranch," she said carefully, "has a claim dispute. The current owner's deed might not be legal." Jesse's eyebrow lifted. "And you know this how?" "Because I helped forge the transfer papers 5 years ago." The words fell out like stones. Althea watched Jesse's face for disgust or anger, but found only focused attention. She kept going before courage failed. "My brother owed the previous owner money. The owner offered to forgive the debt if I adjusted some dates on the claim documents. I was 19 and desperate. I did it. The ranch changed hands and my brother's debt disappeared. If Mackie was there buying horses, and if this turns into a federal case, someone might examine those records. If they find the forgery, I'll be arrested. So yes, I delayed the wire. I was terrified." Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the dusty street. Finally, he turned. "Your brother still in town?" "No," she said. "He left 2 years ago. Hasn't written since." Jesse nodded slowly. "Here's the situation. Mackie is dangerous, and he's still in the area. We have a witness who saw him at Juniper Ranch, which makes that location critical. The owner, Martin Hewitt, is cooperative, but nervous. If federal marshals get involved, they'll dig into everything. Your forgery could surface." Althea felt cold despite the morning sun. "So I've destroyed any chance of catching him," she said bitterly. Jesse's mouth curved just slightly. "No," he said. "You've given us a narrow window to catch him quietly before anyone else starts asking questions. And you're going to help." She stared. "How?" He crossed back to the desk and picked up his hat. "You're the only person in Silver Creek who can identify Mackie from the detailed description you received. I need you to ride out to the nearby ranches with me and help spot him. We do this fast, we do it quiet, and we bring him in before the circuit judge arrives next week." "That's insane," Althea said. "I'm a telegraph operator, not a tracker." Jesse settled his hat and met her eyes. "You're also the witness I need. And if we're seen riding together without proper context, your reputation takes another hit. So here's what we tell people. We're courting." She nearly choked. "Courting?" Jesse's tired eyes held something almost like amusement. "You need a reason to be with me in public. I need a reason to keep you close during the search. Folks already saw me defend you last night. If we let them think there's an understanding between us, no one will question why you're riding at my side. It solves 2 problems." Althea stood so fast her chair scraped. "That's the worst plan I've ever heard." "Maybe," Jesse said evenly. "But it's the one that keeps you out of prison and gets Mackie caught. You have a better idea?" 2 hours later, Althea sat a borrowed mare on Silver Creek's main street, while Jesse checked the saddle rigging. She'd changed into her riding skirt and brought her satchel with the telegraph notes. Half the town seemed to have business on the boardwalk that required staring. Jesse swung into his saddle and brought his gelding alongside hers. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said. He almost smiled. "Good. Means you're paying attention." They rode out at an easy pace, heading northwest toward the cluster of ranches that bordered the open range. The November wind bit through Althea's shawl, but she refused to shiver. Jesse rode like a man born in the saddle, relaxed and watchful at once. After a mile, he glanced over. You grow up here? No, she said. Missouri. Came west with my brother after our parents died. You? Wyoming born, he said. Worked cattle before I pinned on the star. Why the change? Althea asked, surprising herself. Jesse was quiet long enough she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I got tired of watching bad men win because good people were too afraid to stand. Being sheriff means I can do something about it. Even if it means making enemies. Like the mayor, she said. Jesse's jaw tightened. Crenshaw wants me gone. He has a nephew he'd rather see wearing this star. Last night I gave him ammunition by defending you publicly. Althea felt guilt twist through her. I'm sorry. Don't be, Jesse said, voice flat. I made my choice. Besides, if we catch Mackey before the marshals arrive, I'll have enough goodwill to weather Crenshaw's complaints. And if we don't? Jesse looked at her with those tired, steady eyes. Then we both have bigger problems than town gossip. They reached the first ranch by noon. The owner, a grizzled man named Polk, came out with a shotgun cradled casual in his arms. Jesse dismounted and handled the conversation smooth as glass, asking about strangers and horses without mentioning Mackey by name. Polk was cooperative, but had seen nothing useful. They moved on. The second ranch was empty, the family gone to a nearby settlement for supplies. Jesse checked the barn and corral, while Althea kept watch from her saddle, scanning the horizon like he'd instructed. The land stretched flat and gold under a pale sky. It felt exposed, vulnerable. When Jesse returned, he was frowning. Fresh tracks, he said. 2 riders, maybe 3. Could be nothing. Could be something. We keep moving. They were 2 hours from town when Jesse suddenly raised a hand and reined to a stop. Althea froze. What? 3 riders coming from the east, he said quietly, eyes locked on the horizon. Could be drovers. Could be Mackey and friends. Stay behind me. Don't run unless I tell you. Her heart kicked into her throat. Jesse eased his revolver loose in its holster and waited. The riders materialized slowly, 3 dark shapes against the pale grass. As they drew closer, Althea saw they were young, probably ranch hands, and they tipped their hats politely as they passed. Jesse nodded back, casual as Sunday, but his hand didn't leave his gun until they were 50 yards gone. Althea let out a breath. You thought that was him. Could have been, Jesse said. We're hunting a man who's already killed. Can't afford to assume anything. They reached Juniper Ranch as the sun slanted low. Martin Hewitt met them at the barn. A nervous man with thinning hair and hands that fidgeted with his suspenders. Jesse introduced Althea as his associate helping with inquiries, which made Hewitt's eyes narrow briefly before he masked it with a forced smile. The man who came through, Jesse said. Did he give a name? Called himself Smith, Hewitt said. Wanted to buy a horse, but didn't have enough cash. I sent him on. Which direction? South, toward the old relay station. Jesse exchanged a glance with Althea. The relay station had been abandoned for 3 years. Perfect place to hole up. Hewitt shifted his weight. Sheriff, I don't want trouble here. My ranch is clean. Jesse's face was unreadable. Then you've got nothing to worry about, he said. We'll check the relay station and be on our way. As they mounted up again, Hewitt called after them. That woman with you? Sheriff. She, the telegraph operator? Jesse turned in his saddle. She is. Why? Hewitt's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just wondering why she's riding with you instead of working her post. Seems unusual. Jesse's voice went cold. Miss Dalton is assisting with official business. If you have concerns, take them up with the mayor. Then he spurred his horse forward, and Althea followed. Her stomach knotted. When they were out of earshot, she said, "He knows." About the forgery? Jesse asked. Maybe. Or maybe he just doesn't like strangers asking questions. Either way, we need to move faster. The relay station is an hour south. If Mackie's there, we end this tonight. The relay station crouched against the prairie like a broken tooth. Jesse pulled up 50 yards out and studied the building. No smoke, no horses visible. But that didn't mean empty. He dismounted and pulled his rifle from the scabbard. Stay with the horses, he told Althea. If shooting starts, you ride hard for town and don't look back. She slid down from her mare, legs shaky. What are you going to do? Check the building, he said. If Mackie's in there, I'll call for surrender. If he runs, I'll track him. If he fights, well, he didn't finish. Althea grabbed his sleeve before he could move. This is crazy. You're one man. Jesse looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. I'm the only man with a star and a reason to be here, he said quietly. This is the job. But his free hand came up and briefly covered hers. If something happens to me, you tell the circuit judge about Mackie. Not the forgery, just Mackie. Promise me. I promise, she whispered, though her throat felt full of sand. Jesse squeezed her hand once, then pulled away and moved toward the station in a low, deliberate approach. Althea pressed against her horse and watched him clear the perimeter. He checked the corral, the side windows, the door. Then he disappeared inside. The silence stretched so tight, she thought it would snap. Minutes crawled. Then Jesse reappeared in the doorway and gestured her forward. She ran to him. He's been here, Jesse said, voice grim. Bedroll, supplies, tracks heading south, maybe 2 hours old. We just missed him. Frustration bled through his words. Althea stepped into the dim interior and saw the remains of a camp, a tin plate still holding biscuit crumbs. He's running, she said. Jesse nodded. And he knows we're close. They rode back toward town in near darkness, the horses picking their way carefully. Jesse was silent for the first mile, jaw tight with thought. Finally, he said, Mackie's going to ground somewhere with more cover. There's old mining camps in the hills west of town. If he's smart, that's where he'll go. Can you track him there? Althea asked. In daylight, maybe, Jesse said. But we're out of time. The circuit judge arrives in 5 days. If we don't have Mackie by then, federal marshals get called in. And once they start turning over rocks, everything comes to light, including your forgery. Althea's hands tightened on the reins. So we have 5 days. Less, Jesse said. Crenshaw's already asking why I'm spending so much time with the telegraph operator. If he decides to make noise, this whole thing unravels faster. What do we do? Althea asked. Jesse was quiet, then said, Tomorrow we tell people we're officially courting. Make it visible. Ride to church together. Take a meal at the hotel. Give them a story that makes sense. Meanwhile, I'll put word out quietly that I'm looking for information on strangers in the area. Someone will talk. They always do. And if no one does, then we go into those hills ourselves and flush him out, Jesse said. His voice was steady, but she heard the edge underneath. One way or another, this ends before the judge arrives. They reached town near 8, and Jesse insisted on seeing her to her door. The boarding house landlady watched from the window with undisguised interest. Jesse tipped his hat to the old woman, then looked at Althea. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll call for you. We'll make this look real. Althea nodded, her stomach fluttering. Good night, Sheriff. Jesse's mouth almost smiled. Jesse, he said. If we're courting, you should use my name. Then he walked into the dark and left her heart pounding against her ribs. Sunday morning, Jesse arrived exactly at 10, cleaned up and wearing a jacket that looked almost new. Althea met him at the door in her best blouse and a shawl without holes. He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling every eye on the street track them like rifle sights. They walked to church through a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Inside, Jesse chose a pew near the front, which made Althea want to sink through the floor. The service was agony. Reverend Porter preached on honesty and consequence, which felt like a message aimed straight at her skull. Jesse sat perfectly still beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. When they stood for hymns, his voice was low and steady, surprisingly good. Althea couldn't focus on the words. All she felt was the heat of every gaze on her back and the disturbing solidness of Jesse's presence at her side. After the service, they endured 15 minutes of pointed conversation with townsfolk, who suddenly found Althea fascinating. Mrs. Greenhow asked how long they'd been keeping company. Jesse answered smoothly that they'd been getting acquainted quietly, and decided it was time to be open. Mayor Crenshaw appeared with his wife, face tight as a drumhead. Sheriff, he said coldly, I trust you're not letting personal matters interfere with your duties. The Mackey fugitive is still at large. I'm aware, Jesse said evenly. In fact, Miss Dalton has been invaluable in coordinating information from surrounding territories. Her telegraph work is directly supporting the investigation. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't argue with that. He nodded curtly and moved on. Althea exhaled slowly. That was close. Jesse's hand tightened briefly on her arm. It's going to get closer, he murmured. They took a late breakfast at the hotel, sitting in the dining room where everyone could see them. Jesse ordered coffee and eggs and kept the conversation light, asking about her work and telling harmless stories about his early days as a deputy. Althea tried to relax into the performance, but her nerves were scraped raw. Halfway through the meal, Jesse leaned forward slightly. There's a man 2 tables over, he said quietly. Brown coat, watching us. Don't look. He came into town yesterday asking about the telegraph office. Althea's pulse jumped. You think he's connected to Mackey? Don't know yet, Jesse said. But I'm going to find out. He stood, dropped coins on the table, and offered his hand. Walk with me. She took it and they left the hotel together, moving at an easy pace down the boardwalk. Jesse's eyes tracked reflections in store windows. The man in the brown coat followed at a distance. Jesse steered them into the general store, nodding to the owner. They browsed the fabric bolts like any courting couple, while Jesse kept watch through the front window. The man in the brown coat stopped across the street, pretending interest in the livery. Jesse's jaw tightened. He's not subtle. "What do we do?" Althea whispered. "We give him something to report," Jesse said. Then he turned to her, took her hand and raised it gently. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. To anyone watching it looked tender, intimate. Althea's breath caught. Jesse's eyes held hers. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Had to sell it." She managed to nod, heart hammering. They left the store hand in hand and walked slowly back toward the telegraph office. The man in the brown coat shadowed them the whole way. At the office door, Jesse stopped and faced her. "I'll be back this evening," he said, voice pitched to Carrie. "We'll take a walk if the weather holds." Althea nodded, playing along. "I'd like that." Jesse tipped his hat and walked away. Althea slipped inside and immediately moved to the window. Jesse crossed the street directly toward the man in the brown coat. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Jesse's body language shift into something harder, official. The man gestured, shook his head, gestured again. Then Jesse gripped his arm and marched him toward the jail. Althea pressed her hand to her mouth. 20 minutes later, Jesse returned alone. She met him at the door. Who was he? "Drifter named Kellogg," Jesse said grimly. "Claims he's looking for work, but he was asking too many questions about you. About when you work, when you're alone, what kind of information comes through your office." Her stomach dropped. "He's working for Mackie. That's my guess," Jesse said. "I'm holding him overnight on suspicion." "But Althea, if Mackie knows you're the witness, he's going to try to silence you or discredit you. We're out of time. We have to find him now. Tonight." She stared. "Tonight? How?" Jesse's face was stone. "I'm going into the hills. Alone. You're staying here with a deputy at your door." "No," Althea said immediately. "If you go alone and he kills you, I'm the only one who knows the truth. I have to go with you." Jesse shook his head. "Too dangerous." She stepped closer. "You said I was invaluable. You said you needed me. Don't shut me out now because you're afraid I'll get hurt." His eyes flashed. "I am afraid you'll get hurt. That's the point." Althea met his gaze without flinching. "Then we'll be afraid together. Because I'm going." They left town separately after dark and met on the North Trail. Jesse had brought a rifle, extra ammunition, and a grim determination that sat heavy in the air between them. Althea wore her warmest coat and carried her small revolver, which Jesse had insisted she bring. The hills rose black against a sky-threatening storm. They climbed in silence, the horses picking their way over loose rock and scrub. After an hour, Jesse stopped and dismounted to study the ground. "Fresh tracks," he said. "2 horses, maybe 3 hours ahead, heading for the old Pearson mining camp. That's another hour climb in the dark." Althea slid down from her mare, legs aching. "Then we'd better keep moving." Jesse looked at her for a long moment. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she said. "You're risking your career to protect me. The least I can do is help you finish it." Something shifted in his face, a crack in that careful control. "Althea," he said, and his voice was rough. If something happens up there, if it goes bad, I need you to know. He stopped, jaw working. Know what? She whispered. That this stopped being just about the case 2 days ago, he said. For me, anyway. Her heart kicked hard. Jesse, don't, he said quickly. Don't say anything now. Just stay close to me. Do what I tell you. And if we get out of this, maybe we can figure out what this really is. Then, he swung back into his saddle and moved up the trail before she could find words. The Pearson camp was a cluster of rotting structures, clinging to the hillside like broken teeth. Jesse approached on foot, leaving the horses tied below. Althea followed, pulse pounding in her ears. Light flickered in one of the shacks. Jesse raised a hand, signaling her to stop. He crept forward, rifle ready. Then a voice cut through the dark. That's far enough, Sheriff. Jesse froze. A man stepped from the shadows, gun leveled. He was lean and hard-eyed, exactly matching the description from the marshal's wire. Mackey. Behind him, 2 more men emerged from the shack. Jesse kept his rifle steady. You're under arrest for armed robbery and murder. Come quietly, and this doesn't have to get ugly. Mackey laughed, a cold sound. I don't think so. See, I know you brought the little telegraph girl. The one who's been asking questions. Maybe I should talk to her instead. Althea's blood turned to ice. Jesse's voice went flat. You touch her, and you're a dead man. Mackey grinned. Big words for someone outnumbered. Tell you what, Sheriff. You and your girl turn around and ride back to town. Forget you saw me. And maybe I forget about the interesting paperwork irregularities at Juniper Ranch. Althea's breath stopped. He knows. Jesse didn't move. I'm not making deals with murderers. Then we've got a problem, Mackey said, and raised his gun. Jesse fired first. The shot cracked like thunder, and Mackey dove behind a broken ore cart. His men scattered, returning fire. Jesse grabbed Althea and dragged her behind a pile of timber. Bullets splintered wood above their heads. Stay down, Jesse ordered, and fired again. The gunfight erupted in chaos, muzzle flashes lighting the dark like lightning. One of Mackey's men rushed their position, and Jesse shot him down. The man crumpled with a scream. Althea raised her revolver with shaking hands and fired at a shadow moving left. The recoil jolted her wrists, but the shadow fell. Jesse glanced at her, something fierce and approving in his eyes. Good, he said. Now reload. Her fingers fumbled with the cartridges. Another volley of shots rang out, and Jesse grunted, jerking sideways. Althea saw blood spreading on his shoulder. Jesse. He shook his head. I'm fine. Keep your head down. But his face was pale, and his rifle wavered. Mackey's voice called from the darkness. Give it up, Sheriff. You're bleeding and outnumbered. Jesse fired twice more, forcing Mackey back. Then he pulled Althea close, his breath hot against her ear. Listen carefully. There's a gully 20 yards east. If I go down, you run for it. Get to the horses and ride. Don't stop. No, she hissed. We finish this together. Jesse's good hand gripped her arm hard. Althea, please. I can't do this if I'm worried about you dying. His voice cracked on the last word, and she saw past the control to the raw fear underneath. She kissed him, fast and hard, tasting dust and desperation. Then she pulled back and said, Then, don't let me die. Keep shooting. His eyes went wide for a heartbeat. Then something ignited behind them. He turned back to the fight and fired with renewed precision. Althea reloaded and covered his weak side. Together they held the position. The storm that had been threatening finally broke. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the ground to mud and choking the gunfire. Mackie and his remaining man tried to flank, but Jesse anticipated and drove them back. Then Althea saw movement behind them. The third man, circling. She screamed a warning, and Jesse spun, but his injured shoulder slowed him. The man fired. Jesse fell. Althea didn't think. She stood, aimed, and shot the man center mass. He dropped. She ran to Jesse, sliding in the mud. He was conscious, gasping, blood soaking through his shirt. "How bad?" she demanded. "Bad enough," he gritted out. "Finish it." She looked up and saw Mackie sprinting for the horses below. She raised her revolver, but he was already out of range. Althea tore strips from her petticoat and pressed them against Jesse's shoulder. He hissed in pain, but helped her tie the makeshift bandage. "Can you ride?" she asked. "Have to," he said. "Mackie's getting away." "We're not chasing him," she said firmly. "You're bleeding too much. We get you to town and send a wire for the marshals." Jesse tried to argue, but she cut him off. "You said this was about keeping me safe. Well, I'm keeping you safe now. So shut up and let me help you to your horse." He stared at her, rain streaming down his face, then laughed painfully. "Yes, ma'am." She got him upright and half carried him down the slope. The horses were spooked, but intact. She boosted Jesse into his saddle, where he swayed but held on. Then she mounted and took his reins. "We ride together," she said. He nodded, too weak to protest. The trip back was a nightmare. Jesse faded in and out, slumping forward. Althea kept talking to him, demanding he stay awake, telling him if he died, she'd kill him herself. He laughed deliriously at that. Somewhere past midnight, they stumbled into Silver Creek. Doc Ferris took one look at Jesse and started barking orders. Althea helped get him onto the table in the back room, then collapsed in a chair, shaking. The doc worked fast, extracting the bullet and stitching the wound. "It's clean," he said finally. "He'll live if infection doesn't set in. Watch him close for 3 days." Althea nodded numbly. Then, exhaustion took her under like black water. She woke at dawn still in the chair, neck cramped and head pounding. Jesse was asleep on the cot, pale but breathing steady. Doc Ferris handed her coffee. "You saved his life," he said. "Getting him here that fast." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "He saved mine first." The doc grunted. "You two make a hell of a team. Now get some rest. I'll watch him." Althea shook her head. "I'm staying." The doc sighed, but didn't argue. She pulled the chair close to Jesse's cot and sat vigil. Around noon he stirred, eyes fluttering open. His gaze found hers, and he smiled faintly. "You're still here." "I'm still here," she confirmed. "Mackie?" "Gone," she said. "I sent a wire to the marshals. They'll track him." Jesse's face tightened. "Your forgery. The marshals will find it." "Probably," Althea said quietly. "But you're alive. That matters more." Jesse's hand found hers on the blanket. "Althea," he said, voice rough. "What you did last night, shooting that man, riding through a storm with a half-dead sheriff, that wasn't part of any fake courtship." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." His fingers threaded through hers. "So what do we call this?" She met his eyes, those tired blue-gray eyes that had seen her at her worst and still looked at her like she mattered. "The truth," she said. "We call it the truth. Whatever happens next." Jesse's grip tightened. "I'm falling for you. Hard. And I don't care if it's inconvenient or complicated, or if the whole town thinks I've lost my mind. I want this to be real." Her throat closed up. "I want that too." "Then we're agreed," he said, and pulled her down gently until her forehead rested against his. They stayed like that, breathing together, while the world slowly righted itself outside. 3 days later, the federal marshals arrived. They arrested Mackey 15 miles south, cornered and out of ammunition. They also examined the Juniper Ranch records as part of the investigation. Althea waited for the axe to fall. Instead, the lead marshal came to the telegraph office with a grim expression. "Miss Dalton," he said, "we found irregularities in the claim paperwork. But we also found evidence that the original owner coerced you into making those changes under duress and threat to your family. Given your cooperation in the Mackey case and the fact that the statute of limitations has expired on the forgery itself, we're closing that matter without charges." Relief nearly knocked her flat. "Thank you," she whispered. The marshal tipped his hat. "Thank the sheriff. He made a very compelling case for leniency. You've got a good man there." Jesse was cleared for light duty the following week. Mayor Crenshaw made one last attempt to have him removed, citing reckless endangerment of a civilian. The town council voted 9-1 in Jesse's favor. Crenshaw resigned in fury, and his nephew left town 2 days later. Silver Creek settled into a new normal, where the sheriff and the telegraph operator were openly courting, and nobody questioned it anymore. Althea moved through her days with a lightness she'd never known. Jesse healed fast, driven by stubbornness and the promise of taking Althea dancing once his shoulder allowed it. They spent evenings walking the town perimeter, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood on a failing ranch. She told him about her parents and the brother she'd lost to his own weakness. They built trust, one honest word at a time. 2 months after the Mackey incident, on a cold January evening, Jesse took Althea to the abandoned relay station. She was confused until she saw he'd cleaned it up, repaired the roof, and built a small fire in the stone hearth. "What is this?" she asked. "A proposal," he said, and dropped to one knee in the flickering firelight. "Althea Dalton, you're the bravest, sharpest, most maddening woman I've ever met. You shot a man to save my life. You rode through hell without flinching. You make me want to be better than I am. I know I'm just a small-town sheriff with more scars than prospects. But if you'll have me, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Marry me." Althea's vision blurred. She dropped to her knees in front of him and framed his face with her hands. "Jesse Thornton," she said, "you're the man who saw me at my lowest and chose to stand beside me anyway. You risked everything to protect me when you had no reason to trust me. You taught me that being seen, truly seen, is the most terrifying and most necessary thing in the world. Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then, slow and sure. And the relay station that had once been a place of fear became the place where their future began. The fire crackled, and the prairie wind sang against the walls, and two people who had started as reluctant allies found something worth more than safety or reputation. They found each other. They were married in April in Silver Creek's small church, with half the town in attendance and the other half pretending they had better things to do. Althea wore a simple dress the color of cream and carried wildflowers. Jesse wore his best jacket and couldn't stop smiling. Reverend Porter kept the ceremony short, which everyone appreciated. When Jesse kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause and whoops. They spent their wedding night in a room above the hotel, learning each other with a patience and tenderness that made Althea's heart ache in the best way. Jesse traced the curve of her face in the moonlight and told her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. She kissed the scar on his shoulder and told him he was her unexpected miracle. They built a life in Silver Creek that was ordinary and extraordinary at once. Jesse remained sheriff, respected and steady. Althea ran the telegraph office with quiet efficiency and earned a reputation for discretion and speed. They bought a small house on the edge of town with a porch that faced the sunrise. Evenings they sat together watching the light fade over the prairie, talking about the day, or simply being silent together. Althea planted a garden. Jesse built her a bench. They weathered hard winters and drought summers. They lost people they loved and welcomed new neighbors. Through it all, they held to the truth they'd learned in fire and fear. That love built on honesty and choice was stronger than any danger the frontier could throw at them. 5 years into their marriage, on a summer evening thick with the smell of hay and dust, Althea told Jesse she was carrying their first child. He went very still, then picked her up and spun her around until she laughed and swatted his shoulder. They sat on the porch bench he'd built and watched the stars emerge. Jesse's hand rested on her belly, protective and wondering. "You scared?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "You?" He kissed her temple. "More than I've ever been. But we'll figure it out, like we always do." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. Together, she agreed. Always together. The baby came in late winter, a squalling girl with dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Clara, after Althea's mother. Jesse held her with a reverence that made Althea fall in love with him all over again. He was a fierce, gentle father, teaching Clara to ride before she could walk and reading her stories by the fire every night. Althea watched them together and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This life, this family, this man who had once been a stranger defending her at a dance, it was more than she'd ever imagined possible. Silver Creek grew around them. New families arrived. The railroad pushed closer. The wild edge of the frontier softened, but never disappeared entirely. Jesse served as sheriff for another decade, earning a reputation that stretched across 3 territories. He never stopped being the man who chose honesty over convenience, courage over comfort. Althea ran the telegraph office until the railroad brought newer technology, then became the town's unofficial record keeper and historian. She wrote down the stories people told her, preserving the rough, beautiful, terrible truth of frontier life. Their children grew strong and wild, shaped by a mother who taught them the cost of silence, and a father who showed them the value of standing firm. The Thornton family became part of Silver Creek's bedrock, proof that love forged in crisis could grow into something unshakable. On their 20th anniversary, Jesse took Althea back to the relay station. It was still standing, weathered but solid. They went inside, and he built a fire in the old hearth, just like the night he'd proposed. They sat together on a blanket, and he took her hand. 20 years, he said. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes like a lifetime. Althea smiled. Do you regret any of it? The danger? The scandal? The risk? Jesse looked at her with those eyes that had seen her through gunfire and childbirth, through loss and laughter, through every hard turn life had thrown at them. Not 1 second, he said. You? She kissed him, slow and sure. Not 1 second. And in the firelight of the station where their future had begun, they held each other close and gave thanks for the beautiful, improbable gift of a love that had survived everything and emerged whole. The frontier changed. Towns grew into cities. The old lawless days faded into memory and legend. But in Silver Creek, people still told the story of the sheriff and the telegraph operator who'd brought down a killer, survived a scandal, and built a love that became the town's foundation. They told it to their children and grandchildren, shaping it into parable and promise. And at the heart of every telling was the same truth, that real love isn't found in easy moments, but forged in fire. That trust is built through choice after choice after choice. That two people who choose to see each other truly, scars and secrets and all, can build something strong enough to outlast any storm the world throws at them. Jesse and Althea lived that truth every day, in the small, fierce, ordinary acts of a shared life. And when they were old and their children had children of their own, they still sat together on their porch at sunset, hands linked, watching the prairie light fade into stars, knowing they had chosen well.